we are asking you as a father not to harm other people's children. It's simple. Do not repeat the vicious, traumatizing, and militaristic evictions of Lamport Stadium, Trinity Bellwoods, and Scadden Court again at Moss Park, Allen Gardens, and in other encampments throughout our city. Instead, listen to the Center for Disease Control and do not remove them. Let compassion be your guiding star and implement a true human rights approach to housing that begins with engaging the people you need to house. Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you so much. And just a reminder, it's super hot out here today, yeah? The city is still not stepping up, nor any government level, to provide water to those stuck outside. It is still up to people like Rafi to coordinate with the Encampment Support Network to make sure people are not dying of thirst on days like this. Shame!
Shame!
Up next, somebody who saw things up close and personal last week. I'd like everybody to put their hands together for Ollie. Ollie, are you here?
Okay, good, you can hear me? Great, alright. Hi everyone, my name is Ollie Vecino. I'm a settler here, and I use they, them pronouns. Good, this is good? Yeah! My name is Ollie, I use they, them pronouns. I'd like to thank you for coming today. Thank you to everyone who is standing here today, and to those that stood with us in person or virtually throughout these violent encampment evictions. I want to start by saying, above all, what we all need to be doing is listening to encampment residents. They are the experts of their own lives, and they are fully capable to make decisions regarding their own safety and well-being.
Woo!
This is not the approach that I see the city taking. I see the city lying about how they engage with homeless individuals and encampment residents. I see the city lying about the resources they have and how safe those resources are. I see the city coercing people into unsafe situations and living conditions without acknowledging the real risk they pose to the individuals they are trying to help. I see the city have the audacity to throw up a fence and tell the public they are suddenly trespassing on stolen lands. And I see...
Shame!
And I see the city, and especially Mayor John Tory, spit in the face of an actual human rights approach to housing, which is a path forward that Tory vehemently has rejected. I am angry but not surprised by the violent approach to encampments we have all witnessed at this point. The mayor, the city council, all of them, and the police have shown us they do not care about people living in poverty and our unhoused neighbors. The level of violence seen these past weeks, months, years, shows me that no one in power cares about the public. If they cared, they would make meaningful and real attempts to connect with homeless people. If they cared, they would repeal the bylaws criminalizing sleeping in parks. If they cared, they would defund the police by a minimum of 50%. Go towards keeping us safe. I am not doing okay. If it weren't for the love and support of the community and the people that are surrounding me, there would be nothing for me. No government support is provided when you are a victim of state violence. This has to stop. I am not okay, and I've had to take time off work to deal with this, but it was important to me to come here terms of solidarity, and for a brief moment to say this. I have a message for you, Mayor John Tory. I hear you're having difficulties viewing the photos and videos from the day. I would be happy to send you the photo of Sergeant Michael McGee violently striking me with a baton after forcefully shoving me down by the head. And after looking at that photo...
Shame!
And after looking at that photo, I want you to realize that you are the reason this happened. You signed off on this operation. You have underfunded housing and overinflated the police budget. You are the reason our community is living in poverty while you watch from your ivory tower in Yorkville. You are morally bankrupt and are in turn bankrupting our people of the social services they need to live. You are a stain on the city and you must resign. Thank you all.
It's sometimes hard to imagine that we live in a city that hates the homeless so much that if you go to support them, they'll break your arm. But that's what they do. Up next, we have Jen back to talk a little bit about what was it like in the shelter system that we've heard so much about. Well, Jen's got a pretty unique perspective that we all need to hear.
No, pull it. Push it in and pull it. Push it in and pull it. No, just pull it. Push it in and pull it all the way down. Yeah, pull it to you. Push it in. Yeah, oh.
Really? How complicated is it? It looks cool though.
Well, mine does it all the time. I just pull it back and push it down.
Oh yeah? The beat's hard now.
Hello, I am a 51-year-old queer disabled woman and artist currently trying to survive homelessness in the shelter system. I think that often disabled people are left out of the conversation completely when it comes to being unhoused or meeting our needs. It can be particularly hard on us. Many of the resources available to those who are able-bodied, meal programs, showers, they're not physically accessible or we simply don't have the ability to reach them. At the time I was living in Dufferin Grove Park, the City of Toronto had only opened one pool with fully accessible shower facilities. One. It was costing me $30 round trip every time. Even the Wallace Emerson was right up the street. Most parks still don't have wheelchair accessible porta potties or bathrooms, and that is not an issue only for those who are unhoused. When I was living in Dufferin Grove Park, I depended on the home residents to rent areas for me on a daily basis. In the beginning, I was the only one in my camp with an income to buy us the food and supplies we needed, but I didn't have the ability to do so. It took time for people to know what we were about and to start donating tents, blankets, and food. Time for the street health organizations and workers to find us. When the City of Toronto evicts people from parks, they lose their tents, sleeping bags, food, their harm reduction, and medical supplies. Someone lost a cane at Lamport Stadium, and we still haven't found the owner. What happened to them? Many of you have seen the picture that Steve Russell took of me with the 3 police grabbing me in my chair. It was a miracle that I was not hurt, as so many people were. This is not a compassionate or reasonable response.
Shame!
There are many reasons why the shelter system is not safe or appropriate for some people. I'm immunocompromised. My own doctor agreed that it was safer for me to be living in the park than to go into congregate settings. And most congregate shelter settings are not wheelchair accessible, nor do they have accessible washroom facilities or staff trained in delivering home care. Our housing needs as disabled people are unique needs which are often overlooked or dismissed by housing workers. My only contact with Central Intake was a worker who believed that disability is a choice. I received my first and only housing offer after 5 months of living at the bond. The worker kept insisting that it was a wonderful housing opportunity for me, even though it was 9 kilometers away from my medical supports, 9 kilometers away from my doctor of 20 years, 9 kilometers away from the LGBTQ clinic I call home, and 9 kilometers away from my home care agency and physiotherapy. The worker suggested that I rid myself of those medical supports and replace it with mental health support instead. John Tory consistently tells people that the City of Toronto is providing supports at the hotel shelters for us, supports that do not exist. During my intake, I was not asked about any medical conditions, physical needs, or fatal allergies. I was not asked if I was using drugs or needed harm reduction supports. I was not asked about my mental health or if I was suicidal. My first night there, I made an appointment with medical staff for the next day. During my appointment, I told the doctor 3 things. The first was that I was being denied access to the wheelchair ramp to gain re-entry back into the building. The second was that I had been placed on the 15th floor and that if there were a fire, I would be unable to evacuate through the stairs. She said there was nothing she could do about the ramp in spite of the fact that it is not only illegal to deny a disabled person access to a ramp, it also contravenes the City of Toronto bylaws, violates the OHRC, and goes against the AODA 1986.
Shame!
2 weeks ago, I came up the wheelchair ramp in my chair and a new staff member told me to go around and use the stairs. Three months after I moved in, there was a fire in the hotel. Everyone in the building had to be evacuated except for us. When a staff member came up to clear our floor, I told him 3 times that I was physically unable to come down 14 flights of stairs. He saw my cane, I was using my walker, but he told me that the stairs were my only choice. And then he left me.
Shame!
I found out later that anybody else too disabled to take the stairs was left behind as well. I was 10 stories above the fire and there was so much smoke in my room that it hurt to breathe. The next day my snot was black. I thought that I was going to die. It is because of that I posted on Twitter because I needed for people to know what happened so that it would not happen again. I sent voice messages to the people I loved to say goodbye. And still they refused to move me. For 3 weeks after the fire, I had nightmares every single night. And I still get panic attacks as a result every time the fire alarm goes off and nobody comes to check on me. And still, they refused to move me. It was only after I started giving media interviews that they moved me to the 3rd floor into a room that had been sitting empty the entire time.
Shame!
The next time John Tory refers to the shelter system as a safer indoor space, ask why none of the hotels have designated the lowest livable floors for people who were physically disabled. How could they not think of that? So when John Tory uses the excuses of fire safety to evict people from their homes and parks, it is a lie. Khalil Sabright, who provided my tiny shelter, builds them with carbon monoxide and smoke detectors and provides a fire extinguisher, something the City of Toronto and Toronto Fire still refuse to do. They don't care about fire safety and they don't care about us. On the night of the fire, they did not have a plan for us or a list of which people were disabled. When they came to clear the floors, they were knocking on doors instead of going inside to check for anyone needing help or who were asleep. These places are not about safety. I have a friend at the bot who asked the staff to check in on getting a bad batch of fentanyl. They said they would come and they didn't. And he woke up hours later, passed out on his floor, and he could have died.
Shame! Shame!
These places are not safe. I just want to thank the people of Dufferin Grove Park for all of their kindness and support. I experienced so much love in that park and I miss it still. I visit it every chance I get. Living in Dufferin Grove Park gave me the space to start healing from all the trauma I've experienced since losing my housing 17 months ago. I wouldn't have survived without you. I love you and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Up next, I'd like to call someone who was performing some really essential services last week as a legal observer from the ALLB. I'd like everyone to put their hands together for Jamie.
I was actually not a legal observer. I'm an outreach worker. Yeah, that's okay. So my name's Jamie, and I am an outreach worker with All Lawyers Are Bad, or ALAB Clinic. I showed up at Lamport Stadium on Wednesday morning at the request of the encampment residents who wanted their homes defended. I am also the person in the viral photo who was throttled at the neck by Officer Christopher Watson.
Shame!
ALAB Clinic is a grassroots organization that supports people living in tents across the city. Volunteers from ALAB and from the Encampment Support Network have spent many months supporting encampment residents in meeting their needs that the city has failed to meet. We are picking up the city's slack by building relationships of solidarity and by building community with the residents. The city ticks boxes and calls it a day.
Shame!
I am enraged and disgusted by the violence that was inflicted by the police upon my community. We were there to keep each other safe. The narrative that the City of Toronto, Mayor John Tory, and the Toronto Police Services are purporting about what happened at Lamport is absolutely egregious, absurd, and straight up untrue. John Tory loves to talk about the 20,000 consultations that the city has had with people in the parks. I understand that Streets to Homes goes around to the parks on a weekly basis and engages with the residents. The problem with Streets to Homes is that there are no homes. Toronto's shelters are not a pathway to housing. I have been helping my friend Jen, who just spoke before me, find a bachelor apartment for some time now. No one will take her, despite the fact that her housing subsidies go directly from the agencies to the landlord.
Shame!
Most landlords... No one will take her, despite the fact... Oh, I already said that. I'm so sorry.
You got this!
I've never done a speech before. Most landlords do not want unhoused people as their tenants or their neighbors. Unhoused people have been socially constructed as the untouchables, and the only acceptable place for them to exist is in the warehouses that the city calls shelters.
Shame.
In a country with more than enough resources to go around, it is a deliberate policy choice to not end homelessness. This choice is based in ideology which is built to serve a larger agenda of continued colonialism, land theft, genocide, exploitation of labor, and overall domination of the 1%. There is no justifiable reason why a few people are allowed to hoard the vast majority of the country's wealth, while many folks are not able to obtain the basic necessities for life. Their money needs to be redistributed towards creating affordable housing so that everyone can live safely, comfortably, and with dignity. What the city and the Toronto Police are doing to unhoused people is an incredibly fucked up, inappropriate, and disproportionate response to the root issue. And that's what we experienced again last week when the police came to clear Lamport Stadium and attacked encampment residents and supporters who were there defending their homes. Toronto Police showed up to Lamport with batons, pepper spray, cops on horseback, and guns. An officer knocked my friend backwards, hit their head on the curb, and who now has a concussion. They smashed a person in the face with a baton. They broke people's wrists. We ended up with many injuries, including several broken bones. They sprayed themselves with pepper spray spray and blamed it on us.
Shame!
All the videos show us being pushed to the ground, dragged, choked, and beaten with batons, but the police and the mayor lied and said that we were violent.
Shame!
I do not want people to lose sight of the fact of what we're fighting for here. People pay attention to police brutality when a cop violently assaults a white person with privilege. But we cannot forget that folks living in the streets who are disproportionately Black and Indigenous experience this kind of violence at the hands of police every single day. What happened to me really does not matter. That photo shows a fraction of a moment in time that reflects the life or death reality of many unhoused folks. If John Tory listens to one thing that I'm saying, I want it to be this. It is a deliberate policy choice not to end homelessness. John Tory, we are ashamed to have you as our mayor, and the time for you to resign is now. You waste on policing to permanently house our friends.
Thank you so much. That's Jamie. All right, and before they have to go, I'm going to just call back, beyond opening us up today, some really wise words to share about what's been happening. Paige, can you join us again?
Well, where do I begin? Let's take you back to Trinity Bellwoods. So as one of the folks that were there that were taking care of the sacred fire that day, when the brutality came in, they said their main focus was to take the camp down and the folks there, but when the police officers advanced, they advanced right to the sacred fire. So I was actually standing in the fire, taking care of that fire with a few other First Nations people that were part of the community. It was fucking disgusting how they, came in, and they didn't go around the fire. They came in a line, and they stomped that sacred fire out. They put folks in the fire. They punched, they kicked us. They took our ceremonial objects from us because they were weapons. So I'm still processing that. Moving forward, I think that's important that John Tory and the city understands that this is not going to go away. First Nations people are here to stay. We've been here thousands of years, we're not going anywhere. As an Indigenous activist, it's my job to come into these spaces not for protesting or not to say what's on my mind, but to make that space safe for culture. So bringing our cultural ceremonies into these spaces to make sure that things are done in a good way. That's the only purpose of us coming in there. And I think that's really important that people that are supporting these events also are willing to give some of that sacrifice to support the elders and the First Nations people that are here to support you. And that wasn't done a lot of the time. I know this is about Tory and stuff like that, but just making people aware that at Trinity, we were putting that fire, and we had people there that were supposedly solid to take care of our elders and our drummers, and when things got rough, they left. They left me and other people that were Indigenous in line of fire, and that's not right. And people need to take accountability that are here, because some of the folks that are here were there when this happened, and taking accountability and understanding that was not right on their half. There's not enough money that they can give us. There's not enough apologies they can give us because what happened was not right. That sacred fire was desecrated. Ceremonies, and it's not okay. It's disgusting. That this is still happening in the city, and it's wrong. And it's not just then. We were at the Lamport Stadium the other day, and the horses came through. We got thrown down. They took my ceremonial shaker. They beat me and took my shaker, said it was a weapon. I called into them. They said there's no recollection of, and there's no paperwork that they had that in hand in the 14 divisions. So it's like in the garbage, I guess. I just want to make people more aware and more humble that this stuff is happening. What you guys are fighting for now, Indigenous people have been fighting for the last thousands of years. This is not new. This is not a new fight. As settlers on this land, you got to realize that you got to support us, because your fight is just the beginning. Our fight's been going for thousands of years and it's still going on. And we're still pushed down. We're still strong. We're still here. We're still doing ceremony. After all the shit's gone down, I'm still here. I'm still present, and I'm still bringing my ceremonial objects. I'm still bringing myself as a cultural person to do these things in a good way.
Thank you, Paige. Up next, I'd like to call on Michaela from Health Providers Against Poverty and Doctors for Defunding the Police.
Defund the politician! Free politicians!
My name is Dr. Michaela Beater, and I'm here today as a member of Health Providers Against Poverty with my colleagues, an alliance of health and social service workers united to address the structural roots of ill health in our communities. I'm also here with Doctors for Defunding the Police. I'm an outreach psychiatrist in Toronto, and I work directly with people who are unhoused. We know that encampment clearings are bad for people's health, and that encampment clearings have been happening for many years, going back at least 20 years in the city. And we know that the solutions for health lie in giving people authentic choices, in subsidized housing, in a fair income, in social supports, in access to health care, and in stopping violent clearings. And as well in defunding the police by at least 50% now. Reallocating this money to social services and to housing. As health providers, we know that we cannot police ourselves out of homelessness. We are in the midst of multiple intersecting emergencies, an overdose crisis that is costing the lives of so many of our patients and community members, a crisis of poverty, a crisis of lack of housing, and a crisis of police violence, as we have seen. Even before the most recent events, the police and our laws have always disproportionately targeted people who are Black, people who are Indigenous, and people who are experiencing poverty, homelessness, and mental illness. None of these crises are new, and all are the result of choices made by our elected leaders at the city, at the provincial, and at the federal level.
No more politicians!
No more! Evicting people living in parks in the name of health and safety is not based in any evidence. Multiple healthcare agencies, including the Centre for Disease Control, Public Health Ontario, and the United Nations have all condemned encampment evictions due to the health risks associated with these evictions. Over the last weeks, we have seen disproportionate and militarized actions at Trinity Bellwoods, the Alexandra Park, and most recently at Lamport Stadium, including excessive police presence, kettling, pepper spray, and violence, as you've heard today from all the speakers. I've heard from several health provider and street medic colleagues who were on site at the Lamport clearing. They've told me about the likely broken bones, the contusions, the lacerations requiring sutures, and many, many pepper spray injuries. And on top of that, also the trauma for all the people who were there, and most especially the people who were living in the parks. It is clear that evictions are not a health intervention, and don't let them tell you otherwise. They only serve to displace unhoused people, many of whom are Black, Indigenous, and racialized. And there's no justification for the level of violence and trauma aimed at our neighbors in encampments. Criminalizing unhoused people does not make anyone more safe. Criminalizing people is not a health intervention.